to get started and be respectful of your lunchtime. So the lunch and lead is a chance for us to use our lunch hour to kind of stimulate our brains and hear from some really wonderful people who are sharing their gifts of ideas with us. We've been doing this for a while. We've had all kinds of great speakers, but today I think we're particularly blessed because we have a fabulous person from the Purdue Northwest family who will be sharing some of her insights with us. So Karen Bishop Morris is our speaker today. And before I get started, I want to introduce my team. So my name is Sheila Matias. I am the Executive Director of the Leadership Institute and the Society of Innovators here at Purdue Northwest. I'm joined by Jason Williams. He's there under the Society of Innovators flag there. Jason is the Managing Director of the Society of Innovators, and Makisha Neal is with us today. She is the Assistant Director of Leadership Institute and helps us with a lot of our programming and program design and those kinds of things. So welcome everyone. Makisha is actually going to be a key facilitator today of the conversation that we're going to have with Dr. Bishop Morris. So Karen is an associate professor of English here at Purdue Northwest, and she's the director of the Northwest Indiana Writing Project. She has so many talents, so I'm going to try to be brief. She served recently as a moderator for the Purdue Series on race, racism, and anti-racism. She co-hosted Breaking the Glass Ceiling, which was a forum for executives to kind of share their journey and some of the challenges they faced. And I actually attended some of those sessions, Karen, and they were absolutely really inspirational. She has served as the Interim Dean of the Honors College. She's been chair of the Department of English, director of the University Writing Program, director of the University Writing Center. She serves on a couple of community boards, in particular St. Catherine Hospital, which is one of our premier healthcare institutions in the Northwest Indiana, and then the Laney Fuellen Charities, which is a breast cancer foundation and advocacy organization. So as you can see, Karen not only has her professional interests, and that is in the world of English and rhetoric and composition, which as a former English teacher myself is near and dear to my heart, but she also has really shared her talents across multiple domains. And that's, that's one of the things we'd like to talk about today is the ability to take your talents and apply them in other ways to help build healthy and impressive communities where people can thrive, all people can thrive, where we can make sure that our children, regardless of what neighborhood they're from or what their economic status, that they have the ability to grow up and find their voice and have a successful life, whatever that might look like. So with that, I'm going to pass to Makisha and to Karen to begin having the wonderful conversation that I know we're going to have. We're using a fireside chat kind of model today. And so we won't have any presentation materials, but what we will have is some really inspirational and candid conversations. So it's an opportunity for us to really get to know Karen and hear her story.
Thank you so much, Sheila. That was phenomenal. I'm just very honored and grateful to you, Sheila, and Makisha and Jason and the whole Leadership Institute and Society of Innovators team for the invitations. And of course, to everyone who's logged in and is sharing their lunch hour. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that, Karen. And thank you for that, Sheila. What a great way to segue. What we want to talk today, or we want to focus our conversation today on, is the connections that we make in leadership, right? Karen is listed as being a connector of people, places, things, and ideas. And so I thought that was very fascinating when I read that. So I want to jump right in, Karen, and just ask, can you explain the concept, for those who may not be familiar, what's the concept or what's the idea behind being a connector?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. And I actually became familiar with the term first after reading Malcolm Gladwell's The Tipping Point. It was a few books ago for Gladwell, but he defines it as just being someone who is quite literally who knows a lot of people and who is willing to sort of bring those people together, willing to make introductions, but also identify sort of synergies between groups that may not on the surface, and this is my part of the definition, maybe on the surface it doesn't seem like maybe these two things go together or these two people, but I think being a connector is being very intentional. And I think it's important to differentiate connecting from networking, right? Because we're all really focused on networking, but networking is really more transactional. When we're networking, we sort of see it as a means to an end. We want to, get an interview or a position or, some sort of placement. But connecting, at least for me, is really just done for the sake of connecting. It's really for, most of the times for me, the outcome is even unknown. It's just about the possibility. And I think to be a good connector, you have to be able to sort of tolerate that kind of risk. And also be a good listener and a good collaborator and just someone who's really willing to sort of step out when there really is no path and just say, hey, I think you should know this person, or I think this is a great idea and maybe we could talk about it. So that's what being a connector is about for me.
Yeah, and I think that works best when people are their authentic selves. And I want to tap into that a little bit more. Put a pin in that for later on in the conversation. But how is being a connector important in a leadership role or a leadership position?
I think it's super important because I think, leaders are charged with leading, with innovating, with elevating, with activating. And so I think one of the sort of byproducts of being a connector is getting out of your comfort zone, being exposed to different conversations, different contexts. And in order to do that, then you're able to build relationships that might benefit your team or your organization or your mission. Yeah, I think one of the ways that I've at least attempt to stay fresh and innovative is by that work. And I think good leaders are always open to, possibility.
So the obvious question, why do you consider yourself a connector then? And can you give us any examples of when you made like an awesome connection between two people and why?
Yeah, so I can give you a couple. When I was department chair, I actually made this part of our, and I should say that this would not have worked if the faculty had not been so amazing and open to it. But I feel so strongly about connecting and the intentionality behind connecting that I talked to the department about what if we make connecting part of our annual evaluation. And this was sort of unofficial, but I asked faculty to do something that I've always done, which is every semester try to make 5 key connections. And we called it 5 key connects, 5 key connections with students. And those 5 key connects might be, for instance, if I was teaching an engineering student in a course, but I happened to learn that engineering student had a passion for theater or for music, then how could I connect that engineering student to either, a production or another faculty member or someone in the community who sort of shared their particular interest? So again, being very intentional about listening. What are you interested in? Where do you want to go with your life? How can I support you in those ways? But one connection that I'm really proud of most recently is sort of a collaboration with the College of Nursing. And this really grew out of my involvement. Sheila mentioned my involvement with a local breast cancer organization that's really focused on triple negative breast cancer, and which is a very aggressive form of the disease. But I had been involved with this organization for just a short time and was really struck by the leadership and sort of the vision. And I didn't really know at the time, Taryn Eastland, who's the Associate Dean of Nursing, I really didn't know her very well, but I knew a little bit about her work in health disparities and particularly with African-American males and prostate cancer. And so I thought, okay, it's not breast cancer, it's not men, but there's something here. And I just kind of invited Taryn, I don't know, she probably thought I was crazy, to the annual dinner for this organization. And I said, I have no idea where this is going. I know this is not exactly what you do, but I feel like there's something here. So I just wanted you to sort of experience them. Maybe it'll trigger and inspire something in you. And she went to the event, which was great. And again, that was a little bit of a risk because I didn't really know her well. And about 2 years went by and there was nothing until that organization actually partnered with a global foundation called Know Your Lemons. And it provides an opportunity for folks to become certified global breast health educators. And I sort of made this pitch to Taryn. So, hey, this organization is doing this work. They were the only ones in the Chicago metropolitan area doing this work. They're connected to the UN. It seems like there's an opportunity here for faculty and students. And she pitched it to her faculty. And one of them said, this is crazy. This is so cheesy. Know Your Lemons. What is this about? But they actually agreed to learn more about it. And now Angela Schooley and Janet Davis have just become champions of this model. They have personally gotten, I would say, upwards of maybe 50 nursing students certified as global breast health educators. This is what happens when you get smart people involved. Like, I just move out of the way now because Angela and Janet, like the nurses do, they've just taken over in the best possible ways. And they have really, it's just exciting the ways that they have expanded the involvement and connection and collaboration with this local organization in ways that I could not have imagined. So I think that's a good example of connecting. Like, you're not necessarily the beneficiary of the work, and that's okay because that's not the intention, but you see an opportunity for others to benefit. And so you make that happen. And I get a lot of satisfaction out of that.
I can see. I mean, I'm excited just sitting here listening to you talk about that, and the fact that you planted a seed, and then 2 years later, something came from it, right? So that teaches me or tells me that if we have patience and if we are confident in, like you said, being intentional and our focus on connecting people and in the work that we do, that we definitely will see the fruits of our labor, right? It doesn't always happen right away because 2 years is a long time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but that's a really great thing that came from that. And I want to touch back on the 5 key connects that you were talking about within your department. How well has that taken off?
Well, I'm no longer the department chair, and we've had some changes since then. But I think the spirit is still very much alive and well. Our department has sort of reconfigured a couple of times, and so now we're the Department of English and World Languages. But I know for a fact that the faculty in UL, EWL, are super rooted in not only the campus community, but the community at large. And they do make and put forth a lot of effort to work, not only collaborate with others outside of even chess, but with the community. So I think the spirit is very much alive and well. And that, again, I can't take credit for. I think most of the faculty and administrators at PNW operate in this way. I think the little bit of difference was, again, the intentionality and sort of the naming it. So that was probably my contribution, my biggest contribution.
Well, that's a great contribution to add. And it leads me to my next question, because we're on the heels of a very successful Women's Summit that we hosted here at PNW back in September. Sheila, Jason, and I and our team, Dr. Rachel Clapp Smith, Dr. Jane Thomas, we put together a panel of female presenters. And it was very powerful. What we picked up was it was definitely a need in the region for such an event, right? We've gotten lots of great feedback from it. And we've gotten, in particular, women wanted to continue that connection, right? So my question to you is, how can we expand links? Like, how can we do more work around connecting women groups in terms of like coaching, mentoring, networking? What have you done in that area? And then what do you think can be done to even further expand the work that we're doing to link together women in the region?
Yeah, that's another great question. And congratulations on the Women's Summit. I still hear really good things about it, and people were really excited. And I think, again, Leadership Institute, you touched a nerve, you filled a gap. I mean, there's clearly a need for even more conversation and linkages like this in the community. When Sheila introduced me, she mentioned breaking the glass ceiling. And I think that's such a fantastic example. That was a project that lasted about 8 or 9 years. And it's a really good example. Makisha, you mentioned mentoring and networking, but I would add to that sponsorship. And my involvement in breaking the glass ceiling is a classic example of sponsorship. So I know some folks on this Zoom will definitely know and remember Dr. Lori Feldman, who at the time was an associate dean in the College of Business and served in a number of leadership roles for Purdue Northwest. But breaking the glass ceiling, she absolutely invited me to come on board with that project. And through her sort of sponsorship, that began to open some doors for me. We were wonderful partners in that project, but it was initially her vision. And I think being, again, intentional about, the panelists that we invited. Initially, we started by inviting back PNW alumni. We wanted women, particularly female students, to see what's possible. And so we would recruit sort of this diverse panel of women to say, this was you 5 years ago. This was you. This can be you 10 years from now, 15 years from now. These folks are senior leaders and leaders in the community. And so it was really important for us to provide sort of an opportunity for women to see themselves. I think a lot of times, the McKinsey report talks about the broken rung. I think a lot of times women don't have an opportunity to see other women or be mentored or sponsored by other women in leadership roles. So I think reaching back, reaching out, reaching across, that's something we can do. I also like to tell students, I think one of the benefits of social media today is actually you can follow, be inspired by, even connect with on social media folks that you would absolutely not have had an opportunity to connect with. Mm-hmm. So, and I also like to tell them you're the average of the 5 folks who you spend the most time with, and the things that you're reading and doing. So think about those influences in your own life, and then step outside of your immediate circle. Sometimes you won't find it, on your job, in your workplace. Everyone's not fortunate enough to work for Leadership Institute and Society of Innovators. So you might have to, find that nourishment and that connection in a community group, or in some other volunteer situation, so that you can receive the kind of advice and coaching that's so important. I hope that answered that.
No, it did. It was great. You left lots of nuggets. I'm really intrigued about the concept of the broken rung, because it kind of goes into the next line of question I want to enter into, or the next part of the conversation. Because I think that if we talk about being intentional, being in the right place in the right time, which is basically what make sure you're in the room to have the important conversations and to be seen. Earlier, I touched on being authentic, being your authentic self. So I think that intentionality and authenticity goes hand in hand. But sometimes it is difficult for people to show up as their authentic selves because they don't believe that they are enough. I see that we see that a lot. We saw that in some of the feedback that we got when we did late night art, is that a lot of people are dealing with something that we call imposter syndrome, right? And so how do you show up as your authentic self, right? And how are you intentional? How are you making the right connections if you're also struggling with imposter syndrome?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I have definitely suffered from imposter syndrome, and it's a real thing, and it's a difficult thing. I'll tell you a really quick story. The worst case of it that I've ever had was some years ago. I think the older you get, the easier it becomes to be authentic. But the worst case of imposter syndrome that I ever suffered was I was serving as executive director of a culinary arts program in Chicago. And this was a national nonprofit organization that was based in Manhattan, but it was, again, a culinary arts organization. And at the time, my best meal was probably, spaghetti and meatballs, or I don't know, maybe even ramen noodles. But for some reason, they charged me with being the ED for their Chicago operation. And when I tell you, that was right at the cusp of sort of the blossoming of the Food Network, and all of the muckety muck chefs, every name, Rick Bayless and Thomas Keller and Bobby Flay and all the folks you know and love were involved in this organization. Folks on this Zoom are old enough to remember Marshall Fields. They had a culinary circle of chefs. So Marcus Samuelson was on that culinary circle. And my job as the Chicago ED was to hang out with Marcus Samuelson when he was in town. We taught high school students, really trained them to compete. They would do these recipes that were written in French. I did not speak and do not speak a word of French to do these recipes. But they were competing for major scholarships, $40,000, $80,000 full rides to the Culinary Institute of America, $40,000 full rides to Johnson & Wales. It was amazing. I didn't know a thing about any of that. But what I did was focus on what I did know. And what I noticed early on was there was a gap. We were plucking these students from some of the worst neighborhoods and some really challenging backgrounds. And we were putting them in these institutions that were, predominantly white institutions. And there were literacy issues. They had trouble adjusting socially. And what I knew from my own training and work in the context of the university and working with first year students in particular were some strategies for making that adjustment, for easing that transition from high school to college. The organization also had an amazing summer professional development program for teachers, and they sent teachers to abroad to Le Cordon Bleu for the summer. And that was great. But you know what? We could only afford to send 2 teachers from each market. So we were in Chicago, New York, Atlanta, LA. But what about the rest of the year? And what about the rest of the teachers? So I was able to bring some of my experience in professional development training to form a partnership with the help of some really talented folks on the team. You never do anything alone. I mean, we had a really great team. We formed a partnership with the University of Chicago and Aramark. One of my team members had a long career at Aramark, and we were able to provide year-round professional development for teachers. So I think just being, again, listening, being curious, not authentic, but not faking what I didn't know, reading a lot, being committed, showing up, but then really activating and drilling down on the things that I did know, and getting folks involved and behind what I did know. And people respected that authenticity. So yeah.
Makisha, if you don't mind, I'd love to jump in and probe a little bit there, because, Karen, most leaders don't think that they are leaders. They say, I don't know enough to be a leader. I'm not a leader. That person is a leader. And it sounds like you were able to identify with, rather than what you didn't know, you focused on the gifts that you do have. And I think that is that's just such an important notion that, we can't know everything about everything, but we can, each of us has a gift in some way, and to be able to accentuate your gift and be okay with other people filling in from their expertise to help you and to guide that, that the leader doesn't have to know everything. The leader doesn't have to be the boss of all knowledge. I think that's in itself a really important piece. And then, being a risk taker, which, you're very measured in your speaking, but what I'm hearing is that you're not afraid to take calculated risks, and that's a sign also of really solid leadership, because you're connecting people when you don't know if there's a connection and you're not really sure what that connection might be. That's interpersonally risky. Am I going to fail? Is this a dumb idea? Why do I think that there will be a good connection here? So talk to us a little bit about the bravery and risk taking that is required in leadership, because I think that you really struck a nerve with me.
Well, so I maybe this comes from my upbringing in some way. I mean, I was really, I had a father who was raised in the South and who was part of the Great Migration and vowed never to return to the South and never did. And he was really clear with us, with the family, about, folks will try to put limits on you and constraints and labels, but, that's sort of their problem. So it's not like I'm some highly evolved person. I mean, I was really sort of built and trained to just say, well, no is for other folks, or no is temporary. So you just try again, or try another way, or you find a way around. So I really think that bravery comes from childhood, really from my upbringing. We weren't allowed to say, to make excuses, to say we failed. Of course, you're not always going to succeed, whatever that definition is, but you deal with it fast and you find another way. You redirect your energy. You don't dwell on what didn't go well. You find a way to work around. And so I do agree with you, Sheila. I think the best leaders are resilient in that way. And also what I hear you saying, and I think I know this to be true of you, they are also very tolerant of their teams taking risks and maybe failing. So I think to have a dynamic team, you also have to be comfortable, have some degree of comfort with your team, maybe not always getting it right, and your team feeling as if they can come to you and say, okay, I blew this, right? But it doesn't mean the end of the world or the end of opportunity. It's an opportunity to get the lesson, and so it's okay to fail. Just fail fast and get the lesson.
and do it right the next time. Learn from what you didn't do so well. That's great. Thanks, Karen. That's really helpful. I didn't mean to waylay the conversation, Makisha, but we do a lot of leadership development training, as you know, with our Leadership Northwest Indiana program, our Explorer Academy, our LEAD program. And, we hear a lot from our participants saying, I don't feel like a leader, those other people are the leaders, but it's not me. And, just being able to identify where your strengths are, and that's where your leadership emanates from. And that's where you find your leadership voice, is not the things that you don't know, because there's a million things we all don't know. But, how do we own the knowledge and the expertise and the strengths that we have, and turn that into your leadership opportunity. So I just wanted to kind of mine that with you a bit.
Excellent. Well said.
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. You always have very insightful things to say and things to share. And I do agree with, I'm going to just brag on Sheila just a little bit. I'm going to piggyback on something that Karen said about her allowing her team to fail, right? Fail quickly, get the lesson, and go. Move on, get it so we can, improve and do better. It's important that you work with people, under people, for people, who allow you to fail right, I'll say, right? It's important that you work with people who, or I think that you see your best growth when you work under leadership that allows you to do just that. To learn from your mistakes and to extract the fear from the workplace or from the project. I think that that's when people see their best selves come forward. I really do, and I have not seen better leadership than from this lady, Sheila Matias. In terms of the imposter syndrome, I suffer from it big time. And I didn't know that I did until I learned what it was. Until I heard the term for the first time. I was like, oh, is that what that is? When you're in a room and it's like, am I supposed to be here? I'm in here with these Ph.D. people and, they have this and they have that. And I'm just a girl from the south side of Chicago who went to public schools, but I am enough. I am more than enough. And if I'm in the room, that I have to trust and have faith that I have what it takes to be there and to succeed and to lead. And I honestly learned that under Sheila's leadership. So I just wanted to give her a quick shout out there. And I wanted to just touch back on something that's related, something that you talked about with the food program, and you're working with an underserved community, right? Who may or may not just, thinking about, public school system and how that works. And, sometimes some of us go into these college situations or into these more elite, rooms, and we're not equipped for what's in front of us. Doesn't mean we shouldn't be there. There's always someone there to take us by the hand, lead us, show us, and especially if we're open to learning, right? That's important, that you have to be intentional and open to learning something new. But Sheila and I have worked for a program where we actually work with 700 youth each summer from underserved neighborhoods, underserved communities. And it was a wonderful program. The morning was dedicated to academics, but the afternoon was dedicated to enrichment and field trips and things to expose them to a different life other than what they're used to. I think it's important to do that type of work, right? I think that to me is at the heart of diversity and making sure that everyone has a seat at the table, everyone has a leg up, and everyone has an opportunity and a chance. So I know that diversity means a lot to you, right? Can you just talk a little bit about your commitment to diversity and how you demonstrated that commitment in your current role and in previous roles?
Sure. Thank you for that question, Makisha. Mm-hmm. It is very important to me, and it should be. We would hope that it's important to everyone. I think I have a lot of answers to this question.
It was loaded. I'm sorry.
But I'll try to touch on them at least, because I know that we want to leave time for Q&A. But yes, diversity is important to me. I think one of the ways I really tackle it is by educating myself, being a student of history. I think a big part or reason that sometimes there is such a huge disconnect between groups is that we really don't know each other. We really don't know enough about each other. I'm paraphrasing badly, but Martin Luther King Jr. has a quote, something like that addresses like empathy and how if you don't like each other, it's because you don't know each other. Brian Stevenson, who wrote Just Mercy, talks about getting in proximity with folks. Like if you really want to understand someone and make a difference, you've got to get in proximity. I call it getting granular. Like you can't, being a leader or being in charge, you can't always be at 30,000 feet. Sometimes you got to get down in the mud a little bit and really understand what's going on. And then you just have to step up and address issues. I was really proud to be invited by Professor Deepa Majumdar and Lee Arts, and there was a whole group of faculty for the last 2 years. Folks know about the PNW Series on race, racism, and anti-racism. So that was some of the work. And, it wasn't neat and tidy. It wasn't convenient. But we just saw the need and wanted to fill the void. Right now, the work that I'm doing, that I don't know how much folks know about the civil rights movement in Nashville, but Nashville was a really pivotal, integral part of the civil rights movement, primarily because of their student movement. The student movement grew out of Nashville and the freedom rides. So if you don't know a lot about that, it's worth Googling and learning the history. But basically in 1960, Supreme Court said, landmark case, desegregating buses and trains and all of the other facilities, hotels and restaurants. And so that was really important legislation. But in 1961, folks wanted to test that. Is it still safe for us to ride, buses and trains and to go to certain restaurants and stay in hotels? And so there was a group of students, the Freedom Riders, who decided to ride a Greyhound bus from DC, I believe, to New Orleans, but they were stopped in Alabama, beaten, attacked by a Klan mob. It was horrible. And some folks, including Martin Luther King himself, said, you know what, so I'm saying, students, you should not do this again. But there was a group out of Nashville who said, you know what, this is necessary. We can't, this would be such a mark on the movement and might even end the civil rights movement if we sort of buckle under this pressure. And so that mighty student group continued the ride to Alabama and beyond. And they made it. And a lot of folks credit those freedom rides with sustaining, if not saving, the civil rights movement. And so all of that to say, Nashville does a huge deal around the King celebration. It's like a week-long thing. The universities are involved, their interfaith council is involved, business and industry is involved. And it's not just on King Day, but it's a bunch of events leading up to the week prior. But I'm proud enough and really grateful to be facilitating a reading group, Nashville Reads MLK, that's happening right now, actually. That group that organizes the Nashville King Day events decided they needed to read and know more about the history. And so we're reading a series of 4 conversations. We're reading King's last book that really lays out, he begins it by talking about sort of the state of affairs of the civil rights movement, sort of taking stock. But it ends, and I'll end here, it ends, the last chapter talks about creating this global sort of world house and helping one another see how connected we are, what we're facing here. And last night with elections and what we're not disconnected at all from what's going on in, South Africa or Ukraine or other parts of the world. But getting to this transformative place requires that, again, we know something about one another, because I do believe, like you did, that we are more alike than different. And so, yes, I'll stop there. But this work is super important to me. And, it's not just race and sexuality and ethnicity and religion, but it's also diversity of thought, and I think that goes back to connecting, right? It's putting people and places and things, leaving them better than you found them, but putting them in conversation with one another, because we always know that the product is so much richer when we have diversity than when we do not.
Absolutely. That's a great point. We have about 4 minutes. Are there any questions? If there are not, then we're going to talk a little bit more. We're going to delve a little bit more about into diversity. But are there any questions from the audience? Feel free to either raise your hand or type it in the chat and we'll read it off. There's no one? Okay.
Thus far, there aren't any questions, but I think a lot of the things that Karen is talking about are really resonating with people. So I think the last couple of minutes, Karen, if you could just perhaps, just talk a little bit about, any tips you might have around leadership and around ways that you could, take your experience, because we all are unique and our life experiences and our journeys are all very different. There are many things that are the same, all those, cross connections, but they're also different. So what guidance would you share with folks that, your wisdom that you've learned along your pathway that would be inspirational for us?
So thank you for that question, Sheila. So two things really. One is my email tagline, and it's a quote. It's anonymous, but the quote is, "If service is beneath you, leadership is beyond you." And so I think that is probably, wow, I still marvel when I say that out loud. I think it's really true. I think servant leadership is the goal, and sometimes folks are in positions for maybe not the best reasons, but I think if we sort of keep our eye on the prize of how we can use our influence to impact and to serve others, I think that is a very worthy tip. The other tip that someone gave me at a summer retreat a few years ago was stop managing your time, because you're never going to have enough time. Like, we're always running out of time. We need more time. That's not the ticket. Like, manage your energy, not your time. Because if you're managing your energy, your time will fall into place. You'll start reassessing friendships and relationships and commitments to projects, and you'll realize, as Shonda Rhimes says, saying yes should feel like sunshine. If you're committed to something or on a project and it doesn't feel like sunshine, then it's time to make room for someone else who might actually be able to embrace that and grow and develop, and then get some of your time back, right? So manage your energy, not your time.
That's awesome. Two really good quotes there, and a really good way, I think, to probably to end our conversation. I don't want to. I would like to keep talking to you.
Anytime.
Yeah, this has been great and awesome. I like that you ended with a nice little nugget about leadership and what you believe leadership to be. Absolutely, positively. If you don't believe in being a servant or servant leadership, then this is not the road for you. I definitely agree. I did see a good friend of ours and the Society of Innovators, John Davies, spoke up. He said hi. We wanted to make sure he didn't have a question.
Yeah.
So if there was no question from you, John, then we're going to give you guys the rest of your day back. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, Karen. And thank you all so much for tuning in.